Hi, I'm Cameron Cooper, editor of the Law Management Journal, which is proudly published by the Australian Law Management Group, a committee of the Legal Practice section of the Law Council of Australia. We're building on our regular series of podcasts for the journal, and the ALMG has decided to produce a special series of podcasts to help law firms navigate the introduction of new anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing obligations. They'll come into force in Australia on July 1, 2026. In the first podcast of our series, we speak to Jamie Lynch. He heads Gilbert Tobin's AML compliance program in Australia. Before shifting here, he headed the AML program at TradeMe, New Zealand's largest online marketplace, and also at New Zealand law firm Russell McVeigh. In this interview, Jamie tells Trish Carroll, an ALMG committee member and longtime consultant to law firms, about the key actions to take and the traps to avoid as Aussie law firms get ready for the AML regime. We begin the interview with Trish putting out the welcome mat to Jamie.
Hello, Jamie. Great to have you here, sharing your insights and extensive knowledge about implementing AML compliance. You're the head of AML at Gilbert Tobin, and I understand you have over a decade of experience designing and implementing AML and CTF programs and leading operational compliance across legal and financial services in Australia and New Zealand. I'm sure your experience is in high demand, especially that New Zealand experience, because it's been operating under a not dissimilar regime to what's proposed for Australia since 2018. So we're really keen to learn some of the lessons from your New Zealand experience that would benefit Australian law firms, and also to help us understand what's different about what's required in Australia.
Well, thanks for having me. Really pleased to be here. It was a very grand introduction, but thank you. I've been here for 3 months now. I've been working in Australia for just over 6. And I think you are correct in the sense that they're not dissimilar. There's quite a lot of similarities here and there. I think the benefit that Australia has is that they've seen what New Zealand's done and what they've done well and what they've done less well. There has been a significant growth in vendors and providers and expertise. And I think Australia can leverage that to their benefit. I think also for Australia, there is a more streamlined and efficient approach to AML, and understanding perhaps the compliance burden can be seen as a little bit onerous in New Zealand at sometimes. And the approach that Austrac has taken is to lighten that burden a little bit, particularly around the verification of identity and things like that. So I think it is similar, but I think it's significantly easier in some aspects and still as difficult in others.
So if you were going to draw up a roadmap for particularly smaller and medium-sized firms, what would the roadmap look like to get you from today to being compliant in July 2026?
So I think both regimes, Australia and New Zealand, have used similar words. And I saw this week Austrac using similar words, proportionate and reasonable. And I think that is the watchword which smaller firms should be looking to leverage as much as possible. This regime, this obligation, set of obligations, is only as onerous as the work you do and the clients you deal with. So if you're a smaller law firm, it's really important now to start thinking about how you're captured and what capture looks like for you in your specific circumstances. Now is a really good time to start thinking about who your clients are, what sort of work you do, what sort of percentage of your work is designated services and which isn't. Looking at the resources you have internally and looking at the processes which you are doing at the moment. I would wager a lot of your members have processes and they have products in place at the moment which are well suited to moving to AML CTF captured position. The Act only requires us to understand who our clients are, what we're doing for them, and analyze that in the context of MLTF risk. So now's a really good opportunity to start getting your ducks in a row and thinking about what sort of work you do for who, what sort of risks they expose you to. Doing that exercise and running through that gives you effectively a very comprehensive risk assessment. And that's a really good starting point for your AML CTF journey. With your risk assessment in mind, you can then start thinking about where the gaps are in your process and how you can mitigate those risks. I would suspect that a lot of your members probably don't have technology in place to electronically verify people. And that's probably a starting point if you're going to be looking to spend money. Think about how you're going to capture the identities of the clients you're working for. Think about how you're going to collect information around that. And think about how you're going to capture the additional information about the work you're doing and the risks they pose. A lot of people have CRMs which capture data around finance and around matter descriptions, there is a capacity for those to repurpose, to start capturing risk as well. But if they don't, then you start thinking about how you're going to amend those processes. But the starting point for everybody should be looking at the external touch points of the business and the risks they present and documenting them. And then you've got a working platform from which you can start thinking about what the next steps are, what the gaps are.
Now, you have done this with a law firm in New Zealand, as I understand it, and it's a large law firm by New Zealand standards. What was the secret to getting it done properly? So what you've just said, that sounds, yes, we could do that. But how do you get down and dirty and do it properly? What's required in addition to what you've just said?
I like the implication of the question that we got it done and got it right. But that aside, but I think ultimately you can't treat it as an add-on or as a compliance burden in addition to the work you already do. It needs to be embedded in every process across the business, and people need to understand why they're doing it and buy into it. Because whatever you do in terms of process change or in terms of risk mapping or in terms of training, it doesn't matter unless people are doing it and doing it well. So particularly in a smaller firm, particularly when you've got resource challenges and people are time poor, you need to start developing processes which will work for people. The only way you're going to get people to change and have cultural change and start doing new things and new processes is to give them a valid reason why. And so this is an opportunity to start refining what you do and start thinking like, are the things we do for our clients when they come in the door, when we work with them, when they go out the door, when we build them, are they as efficient as possible and do they offer as much value in terms of time saving and efficiency as they possibly could? And I look, with a great respect to your members, having worked in a number of law firms, I suspect the answer is no. And I suspect there is a number of things you could start thinking about in terms of how you refine what you do. And you've got to make sure that AML is part of that conversation. The second part is making sure that the stakeholders and the business owners and those who make effective decisions across the business are on board and engaged. You'll see in the legislation, you'll see in the new rules which have just come out, there is a clear call out that the business owners, directors and managers need to be across this and accountable for it. And so they need to be aware of their obligations which exist, not only just for the business, but for themselves as well. And you need to make sure that they're across that. And that's a really good lever to pull in terms of getting people interested and getting people invested in what needs to happen. In terms of training, I think it needs to be specific to your business and to your process. And I think before you start thinking about external training providers, you need to think about what do my people need to know? And you need to develop some champions who can deliver that in an effective way. It needn't be formal training. It needn't be something which is an hour out of people's time. It can be 15-minute chunks about just gradual iterative change. The other thing which needs to change is the communication with clients and starting that early as well. I think there will be barriers, there will be resistance, there will be questions, and having answers for clients who are concerned around process change and perhaps you're asking for more information than you've asked for before and collecting personal information, be able to cover those off and be able to speak to it confidently is something which is really crucial to getting it right too. And I think the other thing to getting it right is having peer support networks, like particularly if you're a smaller business. Everyone's going to be in the same boat. Everyone's going to be a new compliance officer. Everyone's going to be new to the process. Having peer groups and having resources where you can bounce off ideas and bounce off good learnings which have come to you is really effective. I found that massively helpful in New Zealand, having a working group of other compliance officers to, well, we call it a share good practice, but it was also to whinge a little bit as well. Like that's it's really helpful. And the final thing I would say is getting it right is you can be getting it right and doing everything right. If you're not documenting it and you're not capturing it somewhere and you've not got records of it, it doesn't mean anything. Because when AUSTRAC come looking or when you have an audit completed, there needs to be records of what you've done and how you've done it. So having a good compliance program and having good record keeping is going to be crucial.
So the aspect about making it an experience for clients that's efficient. Tell us a little bit more about that and also where that technology that you mentioned might help with that. I think the electronic verification.
Yes, I touched on that briefly, but ultimately you're going to have to collect more information about your clients and understand more information about your clients. Well, there's a number of ways in which you can do that. And if you're a small law firm with a local clientele and you know them personally, that can be collected as easily as asking them to present at the office with documentation, which you can take a copy of. And perfectly simple, perfectly cost effective. That said, if you have international clients or clients who can't get to the office, there's going to be a need to collect some information or verify some information. Now, a lot of it will be held on the ASIC website and using ABNs and NBNs. And there's a cost obviously involved to that, to access that information. And there are providers who will do it for you at an additional cost as well. that's something you need to rationalize in terms of, is it a cost you can accommodate yourselves and where? Because it can be significant. Is it something you can pass on to your clients, or it's palatable for you to do so? I know there's a conversation happening across a number of law firms about how and if those things can be dispersed. I think it depends on the law firm and their clientele and their cultural approach to how they approach it. But there are providers who will provide that information for you in a nicely wrapped bundle, which is very accessible, but it is costly. There are provisions in the Act around reliance on other people's collection of information.
Okay.
So if you have a network of friendly law firms and they've completed due diligence on some of their clients, and they're your clients too, there's a mechanism within the legislation by which you can rely on that from the work that they've already completed. And that's a cost-effective way of completing CDD. Like, if you trust, ultimately you're still responsible for the CDD, so you have to be confident that it's been done correctly, but there is a mechanism by which that can be relied upon. There are vendors out there, and say there are going to be other law firms who do it too. In a more discreet way, you're going to have to verify the identity of some of the people who work within your clients, or some of the owners of your clients. And there are vendors out there who will verify their identity using electronic methods. So that involves taking a photo of the individual in question, taking a photo of their document, and then verifying it against the database. Again, there's a number of providers out there who do that for you. And again, there's a cost involved. So you've got to rationalize as to whether it's a cost you're willing to wear. But I do think it's probably the most cost-effective piece of kit you can buy, because it's an easy way to complete the verification process without having people present at your office when they are opening a new matter or becoming a new client. I would suggest caution in the marketplace and test 3 or 4 of them before you make a decision around who you're going to go with. A number of them provide different add-ons and different values and different aspects of that process for you. And again, harking back to what I mentioned about doing the risk assessment and doing the process, once you understand where your gaps are, you're better placed to understand what sort of technology will benefit you. A lot of them will offer you a month trial, 6 months trial, and the option's there to start road testing them now. So you're making sure you get maximum bang for your buck.
So that would come after you've done the risk mapping that you spoke about earlier. So the sequence is looking at the roles and processes and the nature of your client base and the type of work you do, mapping the risks there, looking at how you're going to address those. So what happens after that in terms of testing what you've done to see how effective it is?
It's a really good question. I think the best way to do that is, once you've got your process in place as how you would like it to run in an idealized world, you do your conflict check, you open your matter and you open your new client, and you do your due diligence, and then you open the matter and build. However that's going to operate, I would suggest taking your top 20 clients, your most valuable clients, engaging them with them in a conversational way, in a meeting kind of way, and discuss with them, look, this is coming down the track. We're going to have to do this in some way or another. You're a value client. We've got a lot of information about you already. We'd like to walk you through this proactively and get your feedback on it, and get some client stakeholder feedback on it.
Yeah, okay. So it's engaging them in the process to give you feedback about what is it like.
Yeah.
How's it feeling for them? Is it
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly right. Law firms are always interested in their clients' experience of how they've worked with them, and it's a great option to retain new business as well, because the conversation you're going to be having with them is around, the nature and purpose of your relationship and what you've done with them previously and what you might do with them in the future. So there's definitely like a pipeline of work you can develop as well as part of this process too. But ultimately, the people who are road testing the process as you've designed it, the clients and the users internally in the firm, will have thoughts and feelings about what works and what doesn't, and what's effective and what isn't, and where the blockades are. And it's only through refining it through user experience that you'll actually get to a point where it works for everybody. There is friction in this process. It's designed to have friction in it, but it needs to be manageable and acceptable friction. So until the partners, fee earners, the EAs have all had a chance to express their views on where it goes and how it works, you really need to take that into account before you sort of finalize what you're going to be doing.
I expect part of the key here, and you mentioned it earlier around communication and training. Often the training's about what we need to do, but the emphasis needs to be on why we need to do it. And I'm conscious of there's very few law firms that have 100% compliance in actually doing the matter engagement process and onboarding, where everything that you're supposed to have collected is known. So I would have thought that the AML experience is perhaps one that helps you tidy up existing processes that haven't necessarily been fully complied with, because they're fundamental to what you need to be able to properly analyse work types and clients for this exercise. Is it a good catalyst for cleaning up a few other things?
I use this term a lot, and it's a lever. It's a great lever for pulling to tie in as much of your procedural remediation that you can, because it should touch everything. Because AML, it's not, as I said earlier, it's not a bolt-on piece of compliance. It ultimately informs everything that you do within the business if you do it well. And you're exactly right. It should affect your requirements to collect cost agreements, terms of engagement. It should reflect your requirements to understand the trust account activity, which is going to be happening. And it should reflect your work around understanding the payors, the third-party payors. And it should reinforce and give strength for your conflict checking as well, because you're going to be checking not only for conflicts internally, but also against sanctioned lists held by DFAT. You're going to be checking against whether politically exposed persons or not. It should ramp up and reinforce and strengthen what you do well. It should give you insight and opportunity to remediate what you do less well. And you talk about training, you talk about the training as to what has to be done. If you have the time and if you have the inclination, it's a really powerful message in terms of why this legislation is where it is. And you can pick and choose the message as you see fit. Brass tacks is that Australia has to do this to maintain access to global markets. If the Financial Action Task Force were to inspect it next year and find adverse findings, it has real life implications to economic access to the European and American markets. You saw it with South Africa, you saw it with Pakistan. I think Pakistan was $7 billion as part of their GDP overnight. And more resonant to home is ultimately this is to detect and deter money laundering, terrorism financing. And money laundering is talked about a lot, and it's shortened to AML often. But the terrorism financing component is a huge aspect of what we do here. And it wasn't really referenced in New Zealand for a long time until the atrocities in Christchurch took place. And every single reporting entity in New Zealand, I can tell you, was looking through their records to make sure they weren't inadvertently financing that sort of activity. Because if you are seen to be doing that, not only is it socially reprehensible, it will finish you as business from a reputational damage perspective as well.
So the timing of this is spot on, particularly, it's such a connected world. But, I'm sitting here thinking and listening to you and just thinking about the current situation with just all those tobacconist stores and the vapes and all of that stuff, I suspect might fit into some of these categories where you really want to know if you were a law firm advising.
Exactly right.
People taking those leases.
I've seen over here since I've been here an expectation from clients that you're a good corporate citizen. And that extends to green issues and ESG reports and things like that. And AML is just another aspect to that as well. And I think clients will expect law firms to be getting this right and will be asking them to make sure they do get it right.
And law firms aren't going to be the only people. They're not the only organisations. So it's just going to become the situation normal that this type of information needs to be shared.
Exactly right. And what I would say is I think your clients will be less resistant to it than some of your internal stakeholders will be. I think your clients will have been doing this for other reporting entities for a long time, banks and for other organizations like that, going to the casino even. And often they'll have international business relationships with like New Zealand or with the UK, and they'll have to do it here as well. It's not new to them. It's new to us, but they'll have done it.
I think that's a really important message. Just going back to the risk mapping and the risk checking and what have you, within firms, what sort of skill sets, what sort of roles, what sort of people make up the team that should be doing that work?
There is a requirement over here to have a well-experienced compliance officer, and the language around that is quite a high bar. I suspect people are going to struggle to meet that high bar. That said, I think there's a lot of jobs within law firms where people do great work, which is very compliant adjacent. And those roles often don't have a great career path in terms of what is next for those sort of people. I'm thinking about EAs, I'm thinking about finance people, I'm thinking about internal compliance, reporting analysts, things like that.
Yes.
That sort of skill set is absolutely squarely where compliance work is going to be. Having a natural curiosity, having a understanding of the business, having an appreciation of the complexities of legal work is the sort of skill set you're looking for. The other thing they'll need to have is some agency within the business, the capacity to say no, the capacity to set direction and report upwards, and have the ear of people who make decisions. So I suspect a lot of law firms will find someone internally who meets that criteria. And look, the AML stuff you can train. Like you can learn the obligations, you can learn the guidance, you can learn the rules. Yeah. but you cannot teach people the nuances and complexity and idiosyncrasies of the business overnight. So someone internal would be a better fit initially, I would say, than going to market and finding someone who has to learn structure.
Well, I guess it's part of that changing nature of roles in firms. And just listening to you reminds me of, reporting requirements for institutional clients. They are onerous and they have to be right, and they require a lot of analytics, and they require people responsible for them who can tell partners that, no, there's no exception. We need this and we need it by the state. I imagine, some of those people, as you say, are going to be, they've got translatable skills and they understand the business. And I think that's a really helpful point.
And I think that's the case, yeah. And then send them on some training and get them some training. And that's absolutely perfect.
No, fantastic. In terms of, if you were a firm sitting here now in September thinking, got to get this done by 1 July 2026, what's the sort of time frames you think you should allow for these key steps in the process?
I would like to have my risk assessment and sort of mapping done before Christmas.
Yes.
Obviously, that's because I'm in a bigger law firm. I think like smaller, you've got a little bit more flexibility in time. But being able to get stakeholders in a room in a law firm is incredibly challenging, no matter what size the law firm is. So giving yourself time to get them in the room and get them up to speed as to what we're going to be discussing and doing is really important. With the idea that you've got to be registered with AUSTRAC by March 31st.
Yep.
I'd like to be in a good position where I've got most of my ducks in a row at that point. I think I know what I'm doing and where we're going. And the clients are also aware of that point too. So also with obviously the law firms have Christmas shutdowns and it's very quiet in January. January is a really good time to get all the sort of grunt work done in peace, if you've got time to do that then. And that's what I'll be doing. I'll be looking for January to really get everything sort of administrative done at that point and have it ready to be presented to people in February, sort of road testing it, and then March you're getting registered and it's all good to go. I say that with full confidence, saying that's exactly what's going to happen, but it always goes wrong.
Well, I guess it's one of those things. The sooner you start, and having a sense of urgency about it with enough time to cope with hiccups. From your New Zealand experience, was there any aspect that you didn't expect to be a roadblock or cause delay that might be helpful for our listeners to understand?
I think so. It's a good question. And I think the answer there is it wasn't one issue that sort of hamstrung people. It wasn't one particular aspect of the legislation or guidance or requirements. It was a cascading number of factors of very small things which knocked over a very big thing. And I would say if you don't have a clear process and you don't have clear training, or you don't have clear accountability, or you have weak or free, you tend to get really bad outcomes. And I think the people who found themselves having to go back and revisit and redraft everything from scratch in 2 years' time are the people who gave it 50% effort and gave it half a job and found that they got very little back for the money that they spent. So I would say do it right, do it first time.
So it's that classic do it right the first time and do it properly and invest the time to get it right. And long term, that's going to actually save you a lot of time.
I think that's true. And I think if you look at any of the technology providers nowadays, like they are coming and they call themselves Generation 3 because what they do is they knit together a number of older processes and older issues, recognizing that everyone in New Zealand got it not right the first time and had to sort of go back and revisit it. So I think Australia's got a real good opportunity here because they've seen the mistakes we've made, they've seen where the pitfalls are, and they've got a really good opportunity to not make those as well.
Well, we love learning from New Zealand.
Well, I mean, we teach you a lot of most things.
You do, about a lot of things. So with my last question, and I know this is a nightmare question, but firms out there are scrambling around and worried, and hopefully that what we've discussed will help. But if you had to put any estimate on how long it takes and how much it costs, understanding there are variables, how would you go about even giving a firm any sense of answers to those two questions? So
look, I think you can stand up compliant AML process in your business within 3 months, and I think you can be doing it well within 6. I think there are definite teething issues for the first 3 months. I think you've got to prepare yourself for that. People will hate it, not because of the obligation, not because of the requirements, just because it's new and it's different and it's fiddly. And it asks people to do a little bit more at the front. And they see the benefit of it for a long time. Once you've got all your clients, it's easier. But when you're doing it, it seems like, where's the benefit? And it's only when you've sort of got through it that you realize, I see, it's much simpler now. So I think the timeframes are thereabouts. And I think you see and fall into a cadence of be business as usual after 12 months, and it starts being fine. In terms of cost, I think obviously it's how long's a piece of string. What I would say is there is a number of providers out there who will promise you the world and promise you all the solutions for a lot of money. No one can provide solutions and no one can provide a silver bullet. And I would think very carefully about what you're spending and how you're spending it. I said earlier, look at what you have already and if it can be repurposed and reused. Look at what your agreements are with your current vendors and look at what additions they can provide to you. Every vendor in the market, every legal tech vendor in the market is doing something around AML. Think about what you have already. Don't spend money unless you absolutely have to. The main costs are going to be, as I said, the verification of identity product.
Yes.
That's a worthwhile spend. It's a time saver.
Yeah.
The other cost is going to be around training and recruitment potentially. Yeah. I would recommend you invest in your own people before you go to market because it's going to be a very hot market and very expensive. It's cheaper to upskill someone who you value already, and it shows a good dedication to the existing staff. So I think you can minimize your costs. And I alluded to earlier, there are mechanisms by which you can collect information from other firms if you've got a willingness to do so. So in terms of cost, I'm not going to put dollar value on it for you, but I would say I think you can reduce costs if you think smart about what you're doing.
Well, it sounds as if you aren't trying to, as you see some firms sometimes try to do, is just, oh, God, we've got this to deal with. We're just going to outsource it to some vendor or some consultant or somebody, as opposed to actually thinking, in fact, nobody knows our business better than us. We actually just need to allocate roles and responsibilities internally, give them some status and, sticks and carrots to use, and we'll probably be able to do a better job.
I absolutely found that. I think there was a number of outsourcing vendors who existed in New Zealand for a long time. They have not moved over here for a reason. And that was, I think they did a job, but for a law firm, like you say, that it's a service industry where the most valuable thing is a client relationship. And if you're outsourcing that to somebody in a different country who doesn't know your business, your client, or what you're trying to do, that is not enhancing that client relationship. It is diminishing it. And the feedback from clients reflected that. So I would say, if you can do it in-house and you can keep that relationship and use it as a tool to strengthen it, then that's absolutely to your benefit, because someone down the road is not going to be doing that. And competitive edge.
Completely. Well, that's fantastic. I think that's given our listeners a lot of practical ideas. Really appreciate you sharing those with us. And we might tap you on the shoulder maybe in another few months to get some more.
I've only done this, so I'm getting invited to Tasmania. I've always wanted to come back. So I'm absolutely happy to come back. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Jamie. Cheers.
Thank you.